Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barn. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barn. Today, there's so much foolishness, so much to get through today. I really want to get through Charles Booker, who's running against Senator Rand Paul in Kentucky. And he released this awful ad. It makes me annoyed when people are like, oh yeah, this is so good. I mean, you're leftist weirdos, I guess, but it's such a bad ad that no one with any self-respect would have thought to even make and participate, especially in the way that he did, and to lie so blatantly against Senator Rand Paul. And I want to go through it. She's just a race baiting moron. I called him a Jussie Smollett, pulling a Jussie Smollett, because he literally put a noose around his neck in his ad. So we're gonna go through that. When I saw it last night, I was just disgusted watching it. And I'm like, I definitely have to talk about that on my show tomorrow. Amber Heard, of course, everyone knows that Johnny Depp did win his lawsuit against her, which there are some hot takes. I'm still gonna do like a top 10 sort of breakdown video, but there's a few hot takes that I wanted to get through today. By the way, Michael Avanti is apparently going to prison for 4 years for defrauding, stealing nearly $300,000, I guess, from Stormi Daniels. That's interesting. So all these Trump foes, a lot of them are going down. The Durham Clinton lawyer thing didn't pan out, in case you didn't hear that, which I don't know how many people are actually surprised. I mean, it was a DC court. A lot of dim boners, I'm sure, in that jury. I don't know if it was ever going to go a different way, but there were some interesting things, at least that we heard in court. But I don't know. It's kind of like, that scene from Game of Thrones, and Tyrion is like, there'll be no justice for me here today. With a lot of politics, I'm afraid that, I don't know, sometimes we're just not going to get a lot of justice, unfortunately, with a lot of stuff. But oh boy, it's just a lot of madness today. And I also want to talk about, I did watch the movie yesterday, the documentary What is a Woman, from Daily Wire and Matt Walsh. And so they had an actual cyber attack that was really interrupting people's viewing experiences. I was late starting the stream because we had Bible study, and I'm just waiting for everyone to kind of die down so I could put on the film. Though I did enjoy Bible study, don't get me wrong, but I was really excited to see the film. But I had a little bit of troubles first initially getting in myself, but I got in, was able to watch it last night, and I thought it was good. That was really good. So I want to talk about that, but I got to get through this Booker stuff today. Do we really need another Booker clown in the Senate? Do we really need another one? Because man, Corey is enough. We don't need, and Charles seems like he's gonna be worse. But before we jump into it all, I do want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on the website, different articles, different videos. If you enjoy what I do here at Black Tea News, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. Anything that you can do to support really does help, and I really do appreciate it. Check out different merch that we have in the store. Let me see if I had a new one that I had today. I don't think I got the picture. Hold on. It's not going to be all neat and refined, but there we go. This is my pride flag. So we got that in the store. You guys can get that in the store, as well as lots of other things, like the "You Are Not That Special" shirts. And we also have them in cute little mugs. The "My Money, My Business" got black tea mugs, all kinds of other stuff. You guys can check out the website, so please consider checking out that stuff. I want to also thank Brighter Mission Pack. I'm in their studio. If I say something today that triggers you, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't work like that. They just like to uplift conservative voices, and I'm, glad to be able to be here in the studio. No, though gas is like $5 now, and I had to drive here, but I do enjoy being in the studio. If you'd like to help with the gas money, you can certainly go to blacktnews.com/donate. How high is the gas near you guys right now? Because it's never been this high from my memory. I mean, I remember gas being high back in the Obama days, and we had a gas guzzler of a van. And I remember it getting to like $120 for my dad to fill it up. But it's in the car that I have, which is smaller than that family, because that was a 10-passenger van. And I have a GMC Acadia. And I don't know, I haven't filled it in a minute. I haven't filled it up in a minute. But I put in $30 the other day, and it did not hit half a tank. It did not hit half a tank. And I went in, Republicans, conservatives, if you are not talking to people at gas stations about politics, you're really missing out. I talked about one day how I was talking to this one gentleman, and we started talking about the people on the inside who want, who have different like investments and subsidies and stuff with different electric car companies. And I told them, because they didn't know this, that Hunter Biden actually helped China get in a deal with getting a mine that produces some of the one of the main components to like the batteries that they use in electric cars. And so I don't know if this person was the owner the other day. I was talking to him in the gas station, but I was like, "Do you think it's going to get $5 very soon?" And he's like, "It's already $5 around where I live." And he said, "We're not making any money." He said, "We might make 15 cents off of a gallon." He said, "It's a very risky business right now." So, I mean, we're bad paying it, but the people selling it to us in those gas stations aren't making a lot of money themselves. So it's just a tragedy all the way around right now. Biden is upset. I hear about the sort of coverage that he's getting in the news. And the news is at the same time, they have to report some aspects of reality, but they're still so nice about it. They're like, all these crises have hit Biden at the same time. And it's like, one, I never like people kind of whining about their circumstances when they take office, when I'm like, you campaign to be able to solve these problems. So like people blaming their predecessors and all this stuff, like maybe you can do that for a month or two, but like you wanted this job, so just like fix the problem. So I felt that way with Obama blaming Trump for 8 years. I mean, not Trump, I'm sorry, Bush for 8 years. I don't Trump mentioned it sometimes with Obama, not as much as Obama, I feel like, mentioned it with Bush, but I was never really a fan of it. So Biden always going back to like trying to blame things on Trump, and he likes to also blame stuff on Putin. That's blatantly his fault. I don't think it's cool. You wanted the job. You've been wanting this job for like 50 years or whatever. Just shut up and do it well. But he can't do that. So the pandemic, a lot of stuff. We already had a vaccine going in, even though the White House like tweeted out one day, or Biden tweeted out one day, that there wasn't a vaccine available when during the prior administration, when he literally got like the vaccine, like I think in the last administration. So it's blatant rewriting of history with some stuff, but they had already all these stuff laid out. We had an artificial depression. So a lot of people are like, Biden is so lucky coming in. All this stuff is just going to bounce back. But they continue to spend and continue to have really bad policies that encourage people to not work. And we have this big labor shortage while people don't have money. And it's just really the darndest thing. So now we got a situation where people some people can't even afford to go to work right now because of how high the gas is. And I didn't mean to go down talking about all that stuff. But anyway, if you're not having conversations at gas stations, you're missing out at a really good political opportunity. So just research some stuff, and just at the gas tank when people are kind of shaking their head, just be like, man, They're trying to get us in these electric cars. Grand Home, it was invested in that stuff, and Biden spoke at that one of her companies that she was invested in. Just go. You can go down, start mentioning that kind of stuff, and people are like, you really, especially if you're like in a urban neighborhood, because you may think a lot of people aren't gonna vote red, but you start fooling with people's money. They want to teach somebody a lesson. So you're really missing out if you're not talking about it. But anyway, let's talk about what's going on in Kentucky, because I want to cover that first. I will get to the depth stuff, but and the herd stuff. But I this is the thing that I want to make sure I get to today. So, oh boy, I'll just show you this ad. This guy's running against Senator Rand Paul. And we'll go through what's dumb about the ad, what's dishonest about the ad, but I'm sure you'll be able to see very quickly all the things that are disgusting. It's frankly disgusting. Warning, graphic content.
The pain of our past persists to this day.
Oh, sorry. Accidentally hit an ad thing. Let me restart that.
In Kentucky, the pain of our past persists to this day. In Kentucky, like many states throughout the South, lynching was a tool of terror. It was used to kill hopes for freedom. It was used to kill my ancestors. Now, in a historic victory for our Commonwealth, I have become the first Black Kentuckian to receive the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate.
Okay, so your eyes do not deceive you. This man has a noose around his neck that gosh. So he was filming, right? Or they're sitting in an office brainstorming. I don't know if someone else wrote the script and he brainstormed it, if he's the one who thought of it, or I don't know exactly how this went down, but this man got in front of a camera and had a noose, and it was like, I'm gonna put this around my neck. It's so insane. And at the end, I'm gonna spoiler alert, at the end of the video, he's gonna say, let's choose healing. Is this how you heal? Is this how you heal? Like, I know he had the lynching bill and there was a controversy, which we'll go through it because he's gonna accuse Rand Paul of some stuff. But it's not really a thing that folks are very concerned about today. Now, I know there was the hoopla with Jussie Smollett when he committed a hate crime hoax, which he was found guilty of doing a hoax and should be behind bars for it, but whatever. So, and people were saying this is just a product of Trump's America and all this other kind of, I mean, it wasn't real, it wasn't true. It was just Democrat hysteria. Well, the media and the politicians inflaming something that was obviously not true. If you had a brain, it was obviously not true. But Jussie, whether he wanted, I don't know, a bigger contract or something like that, did what he did, and it was crazy. He, of course, he blamed it on like white folks saying this is MAGA country. Yeah, so it was a political thing. And people just wanted to believe it because they wanted to be like, oh, those racist Republicans, even though he actually paid 2 hulking Black guys with a check to do that. And everyone wanted to jump on because it shouldn't have mattered. It didn't really matter to them if it was true. What mattered was the greater narrative. So this is about a greater narrative to him. It's not going to matter if anything that he says is really true. He's trying to speak to a greater narrative. And I said in a tweet, I said, no self-respecting Black man would do this. So I think it's obvious that he's not a self-respecting Black man to have done this to himself, I don't know if it was his idea or someone talked him into it, but this is a crazy idea. It's kind of, reminding me a little bit. Do you remember during the Youngkin campaign when there was the group, allegedly the Lincoln Project was the one who had staged it, but there were people pretending to be like white supremacists with tiki torches in front of a Yunkin bus, and these people were like Democrat activists, and people were like looked them up. I'm like, this person like works for Democrats, young Democrats, and blah blah blah. Like these are all Democrats holding tiki torches, pretending to be white supremacists. And two guys were white. One was a woman, white woman, but there was a black guy who participated. And I'm like, there's a black guy pretending to be a white supremacist in order to protest or to frame Youngkin or his supporters or whatever. Just had such little respect for themselves to participate in that. And this guy just doesn't have any respect for himself or his voters, especially the way he's getting ready to just be so blatantly dishonest to them. So let's go on. Let's go on.
My opponent, the very person who compared expanded healthcare to slavery.
Okay, first lie. Let's jump into that. Let's jump into that. Rand Paul, like many people, point out that healthcare, and he said expanded healthcare, as if it's just like let's add a little bit more cash in your health, in your insurance. That's not what he's talking about. You know, people say universal healthcare when they want like a total government sort of takeover of healthcare. That's what people like aren't into. But there's a lot of people out here who believe that healthcare is a right, and I understand that people believe that it's a right. Excuse me, in some other countries, but it's not a right here, and people get offended when you say stuff like that. But the reason why it is not a right is because it's a commodity. Because you are not entitled to someone else's labor. People have to become doctors, they have to become nurses, they have to go to school, they have to get crazy insurance for their practices and stuff. And they get everything kind of required to be able to practice medicine on you. People create the instruments, people create the drugs, all this kind of stuff that people need to survive. I get that. I totally understand that you don't want it to be too expensive for folks, and you want people to be able to preserve their lives and stuff. However, it's still a product, and you're not entitled to someone else's labor. And we can try to be charitable as much to people as we can as individuals. Like I was just arguing with somebody about this, and they're like, a good community would respect this as a right, and et cetera, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you're not entitled. I just kept saying, you're not entitled to someone else's labor, period. You're not entitled. And I'm like, it's not compassionate or kind for the government to confiscate your money and redistribute it. It is compassionate and kind to be charitable. Like that's you being a good person and giving back to your community. Charity. A redistribution of your wealth is not charitable. You didn't even have a say in it. You have a say when you want you advocate for the government to take everybody else's money, but you want a little bit more in your pocket. You're like, I'll gladly give a little bit of my cash. Yeah, because you probably expect more back than someone else is paying like 50-60% of their income. You're not kind. You're cheap. But you're not entitled to someone else's labor. So that's the position of Rand Paul and a lot of people. So when you're saying, oh, he's comparing expanded healthcare, that's not what we're talking about, sir. But to slavery, it's the fighting against that idea that you believe that you are entitled to someone else's labor. If you believe you're entitled to someone else's labor without their permission, they didn't volunteer it, what do you think it is? What would you call it? What would you call it? I mean, it's obviously not as bad as what's gone on in the country. But if you want to admit that you believe that people should work for you, you're entitled for them to work for you. You're entitled to that labor. That is a right. Not a bargain, not a barter, or anything like that. It's not a commodity. If you believe that you are entitled to someone else's labor, what do you think you support? So so this is like the first dishonest thing. It's not that he's brought up. There's two more things.
The person who said he would have opposed the Civil Rights Act.
So that's not quite true. But we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that. Let's continue watching.
The person who single-handedly blocked an anti-lynching act from being federal law.
The anti-lynching bill that is basically just a virtue signal. We will get to that because he had his reasons and he explained you can disagree with them. But this whole ad is about trying to paint Rand Paul as this awful, terrible, racist sort of person who is for injustice, when Rand Paul has been for like criminal reform and so many different things. He's the one who wanted the no-knock warrant thing gone, had the Breonna Taylor bill, but people didn't care. When he left the RNC convention, he was surrounded by a mob and people had to fight to get him out. Like that was a really, I don't know if you guys seen that video, but that was a really aggressive situation, dangerous for Rand Paul, who has been attacked by a crazy neighbor, had to have surgery. He was damaged, wounded. I think he was like mowing his lawn or something, and someone just like straight on attacked him because of his politics. And he was actually shot at a baseball field. Rand Paul has been in danger constantly for his service to the Constitution. There's not a lot of people who have. I don't always agree with Rand Paul. But Rand Paul he's a Republican. He's a libertarian-leaning Republican, and he's very strong on a lot of his morals and his foundations. A lot of people will shift things according to how they feel the media is going to paint it and how their constituents will read the headlines, and they don't. And that's a lot that happened with the anti-lynching bill. It's a virtue signal bill. It's illegal to assault people and kill them, obviously. It's not a needed bill. But if you didn't vote for, oh my gosh, I can't believe that he's pro-lynch. Like, that's not what happened. So let's continue finishing this off, and then we can get back to breaking down those two things.
The choice couldn't be clearer. Do we move forward together, or do we let politicians like Rand Paul forever hold us back and drive us apart? In November, we will choose healing. We will choose Kentucky.
Oh my gosh. You will choose healing, he claims. You don't choose healing by invoking constant things of the past that actually don't, and manipulating people today with having a noose around your neck as if that is actually a modern issue in America. I'm not saying racism isn't an issue. Oh my gosh. No, Democrats are actually pro-racism. Democrats, they have discrimination in their actual platform. Did you guys know that? I know I cover on the show. I don't know who's seen this before. This is from the Democrat Party platform. Democrats are committed to standing up to racism and bigotry in our laws, our culture, in our politics, and our society, and recognize that race-neutral policies are not sufficient to rectify race-based disparities. Now you could say, well, that sounds okay. If you don't believe in like equal treatment under the law, I guess you could say that. They're saying that to achieve racial justice, which they distort so many different things. Who the heck knows what they're even talking about? But they don't believe like a neutral principle on the law that everyone getting like equal opportunity is actually going to solve things, and you actually need racial disparities to solve racial disparity. And an example of this is when Biden became president, he decided to do special sort of loans for farmers, but they had to be farmers of color. And so he discriminated against non-farmers of color. And so he was actually sued. And one of the farmers, a part of the lawsuit, like had no feet. So it's not cool to want to fight racism with racism, but it's literally in the Democrat Party platform. It's literally in their platform. So just remember that. Remember that, please. So if you want to choose healing, Morgan Freeman was like, you want to stop racism, just stop talking about it. Just like let people move forward. You know, stop obsessing about it. But people don't want to do that. Here's the dirty secret. So many people love racism. I don't love racism, but the left loves racism. They love racism. Sometimes I get a kick out of people who come against me, and I just kind of laugh at, like, they're so angry about me being a black conservative. I'm like, I love that it ticks you off. Like, I get a kick out of that, but I don't love racism. But too many people see it as a financial benefit. Too many people see it as politically advantageous, and that's what you have with this clown. That's what you have with this clown. So let's talk about Rand Paul a little bit. Going back, he said the slavery to healthcare thing again. I think I talked about that enough. Like, you're not entitled to someone else's labor. Healthcare is a commodity, not a right. If you do believe that you're entitled to someone else's labor, I believe that's where the comparison of slavery comes in. Okay, it's not just if they're painting the picture of Rand Paul doesn't want you to have healthcare and you should die, which that's why they attacked him on the baseball field. That's why they attacked Republicans on the baseball field. The crazy Bernie supporter who had the guns, like Rand Paul said, that he was literally yelling, "This is for healthcare." And at the time, people were going around saying that Republicans were killing your grandma, killing you because they didn't want Obamacare, other kind of stuff. So the language was so hyper, was so toxic, which Bernie also participated in that. I'm not saying that it was Bernie's fault, but I said the other day when we were talking about guns and all this other stuff, and people talk about mental health. I'm like, I don't think we're a society who really values mental health and wants the population to be healthy. We want to be angry at everyone all the time. Everything is everyone else's fault. We never want to look internally at ourselves and what we contribute and how we failed and how we can improve. We always want to affirm. And if everyone else doesn't affirm your feelings, then they're the bad guy. You have the Democrats going around literally saying that Republicans have no empathy at all. Like we're some kind of monsters and we can't empathize with people. Like when I went last summer to the Democrat Party picnic and stuff, people are like, Trump doesn't care about anyone, I'm just like, he doesn't care about his son Barron? He doesn't like Don Jr. and Eric and Ivanka. Like he doesn't like any of those kids. Nobody. I'm like, that's how can you demonize this your political side so much to feel that way? But that was like the common theme. And one of our justices got up and said, Justice Bernstein, he said, I love being a Democrat because we actually care about people. And I'm like, I've never heard somebody on the right who's a judge say anything so blatantly partisan before. It was so bizarre, but that's what they convinced themselves of. So just like we can have disagreements about healthcare, about minimum wage, about all this other kind of stuff, but you don't have to just try to attack it issue by issue. But painting is like, he compared slavery to expanded healthcare. Like, but why did he say that? Why did he say that? And I know Rand Paul is his opponent, so he's got to say what he's got to say in a race. But my thing, when I like to do political ads or whatever, and did like attack stuff, because that's what I would do at the Michigan Republican Party, and when I get hired for other stuff to do that, I never wanted someone to be able to look at my ads or the things that I was saying in the videos and be able to go look at the context and then be like, oh my gosh, they're a liar. So the people who made this ad, you're just putting your integrity in question and just ultimately making yourself look like a buffoon. So why would you want to put this thing out? Now, he probably is aware of the fact that he can't beat Rand Paul in Kentucky. But can he go down as some kind of martyr? Like, oh, they didn't want me in Kentucky because I'm black, I guess. Or just something along those lines. I mean, his ad is, hey, we want to heal. We want to move past this. Kentucky has been a bad place, but we're moving forward because I'm finally, after all this time, a black person is finally the candidate for Democrats in Kentucky. And now we can choose a better way, a non-racist way. Because if you're with Rand Paul and you stand with Republicans, you're voting for racism. Like, that's the narrative that they're trying to go with. And this is what Biden and other people used. And I can't say Biden didn't use it successfully in 2020. And other people haven't used it successfully in the past. But it's not going to work in Kentucky. But he probably can get some national support and get a lot of national cash. Like I said with Beto the other day when he did that egregious stunt with the shooter. I mean, when they're having a press conference about the shooter and he busted in to tell off Abbott and stuff. Obviously a staged event. That's not how you win elections. I hope he gets creamed and loses more than he did before. But why do that? Because he knows there's enough psychos out there who will be turned on by that and will probably send him a check. So that's what I think ultimately this is about, because this is not because it's in Kentucky. How is he going to win without some crossover appeal? This isn't how you make crossover appeal unless you think you're going to guilt the people of Kentucky to just voting for you because you're black. Like, he didn't even talk about like real substance in the video. It was just like, Rand Paul is bad and I have a noose on my neck. Like, are you going to lynch me too? Like, didn't even have like real substance in the video. Just wanted to shock people and guilt them and then paint him badly. So, one, mention the healthcare thing. Two, let's break down what Rand Paul was actually saying about the Emmett Till bill. Because he had reasons. You can disagree with his reasons, but just know that the reasons aren't that Rand Paul's a bad person and wants racism to prevail in America.
To ask expedited passage of H.R. 35, the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act, as amended. I seek to amend this legislation not because I take lynching lightly, but because I take it seriously. And this legislation does not.
So, mind you, he was talking about he wanted to pass it with some amendments. Now, he goes into a history of some people who were lynched. I'm going to skip forward a little bit.
To include any bodily. This bill would expand the meaning of lynching to include any bodily injury, including a cut, an abrasion, or a bruise, physical pain, illness, or any other injury to the body, no matter how temporary. Mr. President, words have meaning. It would be a disgrace for the Congress of the United States to declare that a bruise is lynching, that an abrasion is lynching, that any injury to the body, no matter how temporary, is on par with the atrocities done to people like Emmett Till, Raymond Gunn, and Sam Hose, who were killed for no reason but because they were black. To do that would demean their memory and cheapen the historic and horrific legacy of lynching in our country. As Congressman Amash stated, to be clear, the bill does not make lynching a new federal hate crime. Murdering someone on account of their race or conspiring to do so is now illegal under federal law. It's already a federal crime, and it's already a hate crime. He's right. We have had federal hate crime statutes for over 50 years, and it has been a federal hate crime to murder someone because of their race for over a decade. Additionally, murder is already a crime in 50 states. In fact, rather than consider a good-intentioned but symbolic bill, the Senate could immediately consider addressing qualified immunity and ending police militarization. We can and must do better. That is why no one in the Senate has been more involved in criminal justice reform than I have. No one has introduced more criminal justice reform bills. In my time in the Senate, I have authored or co-sponsored at least 22 unique criminal justice reform bills. I am acutely aware of the injustices perpetrated year in and year out in our cities. But reform needs to be more than window dressing. That is why I'm on the floor today to offer expedited passage. Pass it today, the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill as amended.
So, let it go with that. But just FYI, one of the first like political things I went to, I think to speak at or maybe was the subject of the event was like the militarization, I'm not saying that quite right, of the police. And it was a little bonkers to me. I'm like, I had never heard something like that, and I'm just like, what? I'm like, I'm in a room of Republicans, and they're just like talking about the police just like having so too much stuff, and they're complaining about all the stuff that the county had, and but a lot of people in that room were Republicans, but they were like more libertarian leaning Republicans, and so I tell people that if you want to get more serious about police reform and stuff, especially I was saying this in 2020, I'm like, don't give money to BLM. I'm like, I'm like, too many people want it like a click on here, donate, and feel like, oh, I did a good job, pat myself on the back. I love the blacks. I love the blacks. I did a good thing. And if you want to actually do something and learn about some injustices and maybe how police and folks can do better, I'm sorry, you're probably going to have to sign up at a meeting or something and talk to some libertarian leaning Republicans. And it would be much better to talk to folks like that than go to BLM thing, which I know people have gone to BLM stuff. And it was actually not really so much about criminal justice reform. It was a lot about gay stuff for whatever reason. Like my sister had a friend who actually went to one of those meetings, and they were not talking about police brutality. It was like nothing but gay stuff. So if you really cared about the issue, you'd find someone like Rand Paul, and a lot of like the libertarian leaning Republican folks. Rand was their guy. I remember watching one of the Republican debates. We were watching it. Republicans were watching it in a theater. They were playing it, and it was still like this is one of the Fox ones, I guess, obviously. But Rand Paul was talking about drugs and the war on drugs and stuff, and he's like, the rich white kids are doing it. The police just aren't going there. So and I kind of turned to someone. I was like, well, why don't we just like arrest more people? That was kind of my attitude. I'm like, I do not think drugs is a victimless crime. I'm sorry, I'm not very libertarian on the issue, but Rand was just like, you know, he didn't want too many people being arrested and more making that decriminalized and stuff. Rand, so people coming for Rand as if he's someone who's for like a lot of injustice and not for black people, or it's just really, really insane. Again, he's the one who didn't want the no knocks anymore. He's the one who he had the Breonna Taylor bill, and you know what? People didn't care. BLM and stuff, they didn't care. They attacked him outside of the RNC convention, and he's been attacked other times. Rand Paul is like a soldier. I don't know how long he's going to keep doing all this stuff, because his life has been in danger a couple of times for just his political views. In that video, he did mention Amash, and I know a lot of people do not like Amash, because Amash ultimately became a independent and wasn't too fond of Trump. And I'm not here to defend Justin Amash or anything like that, but I just want to read some of his comments during that time. And he has a long thread about it, or had a long thread about it, but he started off talking about how a lot of people will vote because of how journalists are going to cover the story, and they don't believe their constituents are going to do their due diligence. And a lot of people don't read stuff, the actual bills and stuff. They're busy living their lives. And he also complained about journalists being dishonest in their coverage of these bills, because they know a lot of people aren't going to check up on how they're presenting them. So a lot of people are going to vote based on what they believe their constituents are going to believe. And that's a lot based on the coverage of how the journalists cover the story, instead of really looking at the legislation and like, is this a good bill? Is this not a good bill? Um, so he reads off a couple of headlines. AP House makes lynching a federal crime 65 years after Till. CNN House passes bill to make lynching a federal crime in historic vote. NPR House approves bill making lynching a federal crime. New York Times Congress moves to make lynching a federal crime after 120 years of failure. Wall Street Journal House approves bill to make lynching a federal hate crime. Washington Post House passes historic anti-lynching bill after Congress's century of failure. Every headline gets it wrong. The original version of the bill was written specifically to make a new federal crime of lynching with a maximum sentence of life prison. But House leaders replaced that bill with a substantially different version just days before the vote. Unlike the original, the revised bill does not establish any new criminality pertaining to lynching. Instead, it cites an array of current federal crimes and states that conspiring to commit those crimes, which is already criminal under federal law, constitutes as lynching. In other words, the bill doesn't make anything newly criminal and doesn't even target lynching. Contrary to the headlines, it doesn't make lynching a new federal hate crime. The bill simply labels a variety of existing crimes as lynching, regardless of their connection to it. The bills remain effect to enhance max sentences for these crimes up to the death penalty in some cases, a punishment that millions of Americans, including myself, oppose. To the extent there are unjust sentences, it's likely that people of color will disproportionately suffer. For example, the bill enhances sentencing for the crime of conspiring to interfere with, during, or incident to, it says incident, but I think it's supposed to say incite a riot or civil disorder. Any person engaged in a business, given racial and other inequities in criminal justice, we should worry about the law's disparate application. As explained in a separate thread, duplicative criminal laws inherently threaten civil liberties and civil rights. While the Constitution grants Congress only a narrow criminal power, it also grants Congress a broad power to ensure equality before the law via the 14th Amendment. And so it goes on. It's a good thread if you're unaware of some of the discussions that were going on during this time. But people had issues with the bill, like Thomas Massey had issues with a bill, and he like gave his reasons. He's like, this doesn't even, like, we don't even have the authority to do this, like granted by the Constitution. And he had some other issues. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. But people would be like, oh, Massey's a racist because he didn't go along with his bill. But like, do you know why? Do you understand why they didn't? And a lot of people who watch that Admiral clap along like seals will not want to look it up and will not consider Rand Paul. They'll just know that he has an R in front of his name. But Rand Paul is like the worst person to come against with this stuff. I mean, you just think that they're Republican, so you can come at them in that kind of way. He also mentioned Rand Paul in the civil rights bill, which Rand Paul, I assume, just had a similar position to Barry Goldwater, which a lot of people demonize him for. Which Goldwater, he did support other civil rights measures. He just thought that the 1964 Civil Rights Act did a little bit too much as far as it overstepping. And so Rand Paul at times did consider that there was like 9 out of 10 things he would support about it. Maybe like one thing perhaps was going a little too far. So you can disagree with some of his feelings about this, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. And so here's a quote from Rand Paul talking about people mischaracterizing his position on the Civil Rights Act. It's a mischaracterization of my position. I've never been against the Civil Rights Act ever. and I continue to be for the Civil Rights Act as well as the Voting Rights Act. There was one interview that had a long, extended conversation about the ramifications beyond race, and I have been concerned about the ramifications in certain portions of the Civil Rights Act beyond race, as they are now applied to smoking menus, listing calories and things on menus, and guns. And so I do question some of the ramifications and extensions, and I never questioned the Civil Rights Act and never came out of an in opposition to the Civil Rights Act or ever introduced anything to alter the Civil Rights Act, which there are some libertarians that are like, nah, I wouldn't have voted for that. But I mean, you can disagree or agree, but you have to at least try to represent their positions well. And it's not a screw black people. I think we should discriminate. It's like, it's not their position, but they do believe that it's awful if people discriminate, but that ultimately people do have a right to do that in a sense. So Rand Paul will explain that a little bit. So let's keep reading some of his quotes. So this is from an interview that he had some time ago. I like the Civil Rights Act in the sense that it ended discrimination in all public domains, and I'm all in favor of that. An interview asked, but you had to ask the but. I don't like the idea of telling private business owners, I abhor racism. I think it's a bad business decision to exclude anybody from your restaurant. But at the same time, I do believe in private ownership. But I absolutely think there should be no discrimination in anything that gets any public funding. And that's most of what I think the Civil Rights Act was about in my mind. And the interviewer asked, but under your philosophy, it would be okay for Dr. King not to be served at a counter at Woodworth's? He said, I would not go to that Woolworths, and I would stand up in my community and I would say that it's abhorrent. But the hard part, and this is the hard part about believing in freedom, is if you believe in the First Amendment, for example, you have to, for example, most good defenders of the First Amendment will believe in abhorrent groups standing up and saying awful things. And we're here at the bastion of newspaperdom. I'm sure you believe in the First Amendment, so you understand that people can say bad things. It's the same way with other behaviors. In a free society, we will tolerate boorish people who have abhorrent behavior, but if we're civilized people, we publicly criticize that and don't belong to those groups or don't associate with those people. So here's a little bit more of Rand Paul, another interview. Robert Siegel said, you said that businesses should be able to have the right to refuse service to anyone, and that the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, was an overreach by the federal government. Would you say the same by extension of the 1964 Civil Rights Act? And Paul said, what I've always said is that I'm opposed to institutional racism, and I would have, had I've been alive at the time, I think had the courage to march with Martin Luther King to overturn institutional racism. And I see no place in our society for institutional racism. Siegel said, but are you saying that if you had been around at the time, you would have hoped that you would have marched with Martin Luther King, but voted with Barry Goldwater against the 1964 Civil Rights Act? And he said, well, actually, I think it's confusing on a lot of cases, but actually was in the civil rights case, because see, a lot of the things that actually were in the bill I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of everything with regards to ending institutional racism. So I think there's a lot to be desired in the civil rights. And to tell you the truth, I haven't really read all through it because it was past 40 years ago and haven't been a real pressing issue in the campaign and whether we're going to vote on the Civil Rights Act. And Siegel said, but it's been one of the major developments in American history and, of course, of your life. I mean, do you think the 64 Civil Rights Act or the ADA, for that matter, were just overreaches and that businesses shouldn't be bothered by people with basis in law and sue them for redress? And Paul said, right, I think a lot of things could be handled locally. For example, I think we should try to do everything we can to allow for people with disabilities and handicaps. You know, we do it for our office or wheelchair ramps and things like that. I think you have a 2-story office, you hire someone who's handicapped, it might be reasonable to let him have an office on the first floor rather than the government saying you have to have $100,000 elevator. And I think when you get to solutions like that, the more local, the better, and the more common sense the decisions are rather than having a federal government to make those decisions. And I'm going to read one more interview with Maddow. Meadow asks, do you think a private business has a right to say we don't serve Black people? And he said, I'm not in favor of any discrimination in any form. I would never belong to any club that excluded anybody for race. We still, which there is a senator, is a White House who has who is a part of a club that was like, didn't have Black members or something. I'm trying to look at it really quick. It's been like the jokes and stuff around like Comfortably Smug talks about it quite often. But Sheldon Whitehouse under fire for membership at all white club. So I just want to, yeah, Sheldon Whitehouse. I just wanted to put that out there while it's on my mind. Anyway, he said, I'm not in favor of any discrimination in any form. I would never belong to any club that excluded anybody for race. We still do have private clubs in America that can discriminate based on race. But I think it's important about this debate is not written into any specific gotcha on this, but asking the question, what about freedom of speech? Should we limit speech from people we find abhorrent? Should we limit racists from speaking? I don't want to be associated with those people, but I also don't want to limit their speech in any way in the sense that we tolerate boorish and uncivilized behavior, because it's one of the things freedom requires is that we allow people to be boorish and uncivilized, and that doesn't mean we approve of it. I think the problem with this debate is by getting muddled down into it, the implication is somehow that I would approve of any racism or discrimination, and I don't in any form. There are 10 different titles to the Civil Rights Act, and 9 of the 10 deal with public institutions, and one that deals with private institutions. Had I been around, I would have tried to modify that. When you support 9 of 10 things in a good piece of legislation, do you vote for it or against it? And sometimes those are different situations. I do defend and believe that the government should not be involved with institutional racism or discrimination or segregation in schools, busing, all those things. But had I been there, there would have been some discussion over one of the titles of the Civil Rights. And I think that's a valid point, and still a valid discussion, because the thing is, if we want to harbor in on private businesses and their policies, then you have to have a discussion about, do you want to abridge the First Amendment as well? I really think that discrimination and racism is a horrible thing, and I don't want any form of it in our government, in our public square. So that's a couple interviews he's had. He's not against the Civil Rights Act. And I think from that last interview, he's saying, even though you may not necessarily agree with everything that may be in there in a bill, that doesn't mean that you're not going to vote against it just because there's maybe something that you disagree with. And there is a question, even though people are awful and terrible and sometimes say terrible things, do you limit their, freedom of association and other stuff? And I agree with Rand Paul that, and I think everyone agrees that discrimination is bad, but apparently not everyone agrees that discrimination is bad, because discrimination is literally like in the Democrat Party platform. And one of the first things that Joe Biden did was discriminate against people when he got into office. So some people do believe in discrimination. They just believe it's good for their side, so that they're willing to do it, especially if it's for restorative racial justice or whatever. So, when people talk about the Civil Rights Act and they push back on a couple different things, just know that it's not because they're racist, it's because they're taking a more sort of libertarian approach to it. You can agree and you can disagree with them, but it's not because they're bad people. Rand Paul has been fighting for justice for people for a long time, and certain things that impact minorities at a disproportionate rate. And you could say it's because they commit a disproportionate amount of crime, but he's like a less sort of government interference sort of person anyway. So they're just attacking someone who is so on their side because he is an R. And it's so dishonest. So I know I talked about this basically the whole hour. And I did not mean to, but I meant to do it faster, but man, this was the thing I wanted to talk about. This was the thing I wanted to talk about so badly. So I got it off my chest to some degree. I don't even know if I'm going to chop that up and put it in short because it was so long. But I got to talk about Amber Heard. I got to talk about Amber Heard. So she did release, and again, I'm going to do like a top 10 breakdown thing of the trial. And some things surrounding it. But let's talk about Miss Heard. And she put out a statement after it was over, and so did Johnny. But her statement, let me get rid of my little icon there so we can read that. The disappointment I feel today is beyond words. I'm heartbroken that the mountain of evidence still was not enough to stand up to the disproportionate power, influence, and sway of my ex-husband. I am even more disappointed with what was what this verdict means for other women. It is a setback, and it sets back the clock to a time when a woman who spoke up and spoke out could be publicly shamed and humiliated. It sets back the idea that violence against women is to be taken seriously. I believe Johnny's attorneys succeeded in getting the jury to overlook the key issue of freedom of speech and ignore evidence that was so conclusive that was in the UK. I'm sad. I lost this case, but I'm sadder that I seem to have lost a right that I thought as an American to speak freely and open. Oh boy. So Miss Heard. And so her lawyer went on the Today Show and said that Amber was just like, oh, it just really sucks for women. Really sucks for women, the martyr she is. So at least her lawyer claims there's a lot of stuff that was in the UK trial that was not admitted in their trial, and I don't know. Her lawyer would also seem pretty peeved that they couldn't let them know about stuff pertaining to that trial, and I'm like, you don't see why that, like, from the judge's perspective, everyone else, why that would not be a great thing. I understand why you want it in, but you want this other stuff to influence the jury in that sort of way. You got to know that's not fair, right? I don't think that's quite fair. So the jury like totally rejected Amber's story, and she claims that they gave a mountain of evidence in the trial, and people were complaining about how folks would analyze her bruises and other stuff like that under a microscope, and it's like, it's evidence in a trial. And then the next day they'd show pictures where it didn't exist, and then of course all these people watching it are jumping in and weighing in and talking about it. They're celebrities who decided to fight this all out in the public. There were times when Johnny like called on the phone, and he was like, we can handle this all outside. But they crossed many bridges with each other where it was like point of no return. It's really toxic for the both of them, this whole situation. And I hope no one obviously people have messy divorces and stuff, not to this sort of degree, because not everyone is this famous. I mean, Johnny Depp is unusually famous. There's a lot of famous people out there, but this is a high caliber of fame out there in the world. So you're not going to see many stuff like this quite ever again. And you may, but I hope no one has to have messy situations like this, even in private, and have toxic relationships like what they obviously had. But people didn't find her credible for whatever reason. Maybe it was like her facial expressions, maybe because stuff that she said on the stand didn't make sense, including how she covered up her bruises and other stuff. Like she had like a makeup kit that she had like was carrying around, and the makeup company like took that and was like, this kit didn't exist then at the time where you claimed that you had it. Like, so there was all these people investigating, people doing all these TikToks and stuff. So they believe that the jury was impacted by social media. Maybe the jury watched stuff from social media or didn't. They weren't supposed to. And Amber apparently wants to have a mistrial redo, whatever, because she definitely doesn't, according to the lawyer, have the money to pay Johnny. But just acting like this is a big setback for all victims, and like, how sometimes your problems are yours. Like, this is a uniquely toxic thing. There's not a lot of women, I think, that would poop in somebody's bed, right? Um, not there's not a lot of folks like Amber. So I get what she's saying and her lawyers are saying, but this seems like a you problem, and I don't think this is gonna be the major setback for women everywhere um that you think it is. But it could be a major step forward for a lot of men who are also victims of abuse, which she at least admitted on a video, like recording, audio recording, that she has hit him. And I'm not trying to say that he's innocent, but apparently the jury didn't think that she proved that he was abusive or anything like that. But she's definitely not innocent. They just have a very toxic relationship. So no, I think this is a you problem. It's not a setback for all women. But the root had a pretty crazy article about this. Amber Heard verdict sends a message to black women everywhere. How? We ain't got nothing to do with this. We got nothing to do with this. What does this have to do with black women? Nothing. Nothing. What's with these narratives? What's with all these crazy narratives? And I did read this article. And this article is so stupid. Amber Heard's verdict sends a message to black women everywhere. If the mistreatment of a wealthy white woman, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white actress is ridiculed by the world, what does that mean for black women? So let me get to like a juicy part of it, because it reports a little bit of the story as she gets to pay. But this is like basically the point. If the mistreatment of a wealthy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white actress is ridiculed by the world, what does that mean for black women? For 6 weeks, Heard testified how Depp not only sexually abused her, but also physically assaulted her throughout the relationship. She claimed that he headbutted her as well as punched her and dragged her around by her hair. Here's how she testified, like, about being headbutted, though. She'd be like, he balled his fist, he drew it back, and then he headbutted me in the face. And people like on TikTok like acted it out. And I'm not saying that Johnny isn't a master fighter strategist who wanted to keep her guessing, but she'd say stuff like he attacked me, like I left the room and then he did something to me, and like I thought you was on the room, or I thought you were on the floor. Like there wasn't a good flow to like how she told her stories, and she just didn't come off as credible, obviously, to the jury. So maybe she's telling the truth, but she didn't come off credible to the jury. So anyway, Heard maintains that everything she wrote in the op-ed entitled "I Spoke Up Against Sexual Violence and Faced Our Culture's Wrath That Has to Change" was true. Depp denied all the allegations. For black women, and mind you, these people are not black. For black women who do not have whiteness or fame or money to protect them, Heard's words of the verdict as a setback ring especially true. I don't know if this person's been in the shade room. That's like a page on Instagram where like black folks like congregate and write stuff and comment and look at different stuff. They are not team O's. I'm so sad because Amber's story wasn't told. Like, nah, that's not what's happening. Not in the least bit. Whether you believe her or not, the way the world treated Heard was downright cruel and uncalled for. And people would say that op-ed was uncalled for, especially if it's not true. Not only were her bruises placed under a microscope by forensic experts during the trial, yeah, it's called observing the evidence. Social media join in on the skepticism. Yeah, because they're watching the trial. Heard was turned in everything from memes to murals mocking the validity of her abuse. Some even believed Depp when he said that she was an aggressor in the relationship. There is evidence. There was clear evidence. Her verbally admitting it. She's like, dude, you were not punched. I hit you. That came from her mouth. if all of Heard's privilege couldn't protect her from such viciousness, Black women, like always, remain even more vulnerable. That's basically it. If basically the article is, if her white privilege didn't save her, we poor Black women don't stand a chance in this cruel world. Who will believe us if the white women weren't believed? It's so ridiculous. The Root, by the way, is one of the trashiest, dumbest take sites ever. So if you ever need a laugh, you can go see what The Root has posted. But um, Amber herself, like I said, it just sounds like a you problem, Amber, that people didn't find her credible, and they had to like reject her, because if they believed that he was an abuser, they would have had to not rewarded. He basically won all his stuff, and she got rewarded a little bit, but that wasn't even against Johnny, that was against a lawyer. And so they rejected her flat out for what she was saying. People didn't quite think her testimony was there, the evidence was there. Johnny had great lawyers. They really dropped the ball on Amber's team. And you know what? Amber thought people were really dropping the ball at one point, because she had to fire her team doing her press and PR and stuff. And then she went with another team, and all of a sudden you started seeing all these more articles. You saw people attacking TikTokers and all this other kind of stuff. And then people did see their stuff being taken down as well. So people were paranoid about that as well. So people were really on the move when she hired that different team. But you see Rolling Stone, who has pushed like rape hoaxes and stuff in the past, say stuff, and the media has just been really irresponsible, especially with a lot of the Me Too stuff. Like, I mean, we can go back to Kavanaugh all day long, and which Avenatti, by the way, I'll briefly just mention, he is going to jail for like robbing Stormi Daniels, and it's just funny. It's just so, because people are like, is Avenatti should run for president, and he was hanging out. He was on CNN so much, hanging out at their parties or whatever, and he was just a crook. But he was someone they had on because they didn't like Trump. There's all these allegations with like Kavanaugh folks and other stuff like that, and they just wanted people they did not like to go down, even though stuff they said didn't make sense. At the end of the day, it didn't matter. Like one time I was watching CNN, they're like, we didn't confirm all this, but here's this stuff we heard about the gang rape. But I'm like, what? Like, aren't you gonna, like, you're not gonna confirm some of the stuff before you say, like, before it goes on air? So the Washington Post did post that article with Amber, and the jury believes it's not true, but they are the ones who posted. Now it's an op-ed, so I don't know where you go from there, but they're like, this is basically fake news. So the Washington Post isn't innocent. The media who pushes isn't innocent. But Amber, again, that sounds like a you problem. The Root, it's not a problem for Black women. This is something that, just between Amber and Johnny, and I guess everyone who watched the jury. And you know what's another thing about her statement? She didn't even like say, oh, I thank you, the judge. Like, Johnny thanked the judge. I understand you lost and you're upset, but you could at least thank the judge and thank the jury, for their time that they had to listen to all of your relationship garbage. Because a lot of it was just obscene. Just watching like them relay their stuff that they went through and the torture that they kind of had with each other. The drama. I mean, some people love the drama, but it's just like, how can people get so messed up? How can people get so messed up? So you could have at least thanked the jury and the judge and stuff, but it's like, oh, well, they got it wrong, and all the women out there. And it's another thing that's scrappy for the Root to write that article. I remember when the Kavanaugh situation happened, and there was, maybe it was the Washington Post, but there was a newspaper that put out a story saying that they were in a room talking with black men about it, and the black men were like Team Kavanaugh because they're like, what about due process? And they were like shocked talking to the black guys because they're like you can't just judge a person and just assume that they've done this heinous thing without like evidence. And again, she didn't have time, place, location. Everyone involved said it didn't happen, but everyone's like, oh, he did it. And so yes, there were men who were like, this is not cool. What if that happens to me? What if that happens to my son? Nobody wants their daughter to be in a position where they are aggressed upon, but people don't want their sons to be falsely accused. So they're looking at the perspective of black women, even though Amber's not black. But what about black men that get falsely accused? That could be like in Johnny's situation. Like, well, whether you believe her or not, well, why don't you give the same leeway to Johnny? Because what if you believe that he was falsely accused? Where's the sympathy there? And where's the sympathy for the black men? How come this isn't a victory for black men who are falsely accused? It's just absurd. Just absurd. But someone said, but believe all women. Believe all women was always stupid because everyone knows a woman who lies. Everyone knows a woman who lies. And I'm not, and I think, and I think I said this yesterday. Everyone probably knows a woman who would lie about something like this. I'm not saying you're their friend. I'm not saying you're close, but you may know a woman who would lie about something like this. And maybe you know a woman who has lied about something like this, or you know a man who's been set up in a way. So no, believe all women was always stupid. And push come to shove, they didn't believe anything that they were talking about. But anyway, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Got some stuff off my chest because, like I said, when I saw the video, I was like, I gotta talk about this. I'm way over time, so I'm not gonna really talk about the what is a woman. I did have some clips that I want to show you guys, but I will open up the show tomorrow talking about it. Overall, I did enjoy it. I think it's important content to watch. If you haven't seen it, from my end, I didn't really see anything super crazy that I didn't really expect or I don't think really didn't know, because even like when they got to the breakdown of like John Money and Kinsey, the pervert who like wanted to basically sexualize America, I unfortunately know about those people. And I've mentioned them on the show, but those are some crazy. I kind of wished they had gone a little bit more into that, but there are documentaries about Kinsey, and I've seen one of them. There's one in my inbox that a friend sent me that's like 3 hours long that I haven't gotten to yet, but there's some really perverse people who've been on a path forward to just pervert the country for a very long time, and a lot of people are still pushing that agenda forward in the guise of like freedom and independence and education, when a lot of it is just really perversion. So we'll talk about that more at a different time. Thank you guys for watching. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different content that I have on the website, different articles that I have on the site. Please check out different merchandise that I have. Like I got this. This is my pride flag shirt. You guys can get that along with other sort of merchandise that we have in the store, like the little cute "You Are Not the Special" mugs. We have the Constitution is a Glorious Liberty document with Frederick Douglass there with the glasses. We have quite a bit of the gender specific woman kind of stuff, like the Club XX lifetime membership. Got those in different things like t-shirts, crop hoodies, and regular hoodies, and dresses, and so on. So check that stuff out at the website. And if you enjoy what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com. Appreciate the support. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing and hitting notification bells and all the good stuff. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all kinds of stuff. God bless you guys, and I'll see